There's a moment when addiction stops feeling like bad behavior and starts feeling like possession. A moment where, at least I started feeling like my brain had turned against me. A neuroscientist walked into the room one afternoon carrying a dry erase marker and the exhausted expression of someone who had dedicated their life to explaining human consciousness to people who had recently traded copper wire for fentanyl. Most lectures and treatment disappeared into the void immediately. Sound would enter one ear and leave the other wearing snowshoes. And I would nod at appropriate intervals, present in the legal sense. But this one really landed. She started drawing crude little diagrams on a scratched up whiteboard stained with ghost marks from 1,000 previous attempts to save people like me. Dopamine pathways, reward circuitry, the prefrontal cortex, opioid receptors. And for the first time in my life, somebody explained addiction to me without using the language of morality. Not weakness, not failure, not sin, not poor choices. Biology, chemistry, the physical changes inside an organ made of meat and electricity. She explained that after 30 years of drug and alcohol abuse, my brain had literally reorganized itself around survival signals that weren't real. And that's the horrifying part. Addiction hijacks the machinery designed to keep you alive. Food, love, human connection, safety, purpose. The brain uses chemicals to tell you that those things matter. The drugs arrive like a criminal wearing a stolen police uniform, and suddenly the system can't tell the difference between oxygen and heroin, between intimacy and alcohol, between survival and self-destruction. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, that's why it feels like I'm dying without it. Ignore the withdrawals. That's not what I'm talking about. This is long after the shaking stops. But it's because somewhere deep inside the circuitry, my brain genuinely believes I am. And that realization changed me. Not instantly. Recovery is not a movie montage where a sad man jogs near the ocean and suddenly understands forgiveness. Human beings love pretending transformation happens in one beautiful cinematic moment because reality is ugly and it takes forever. But understanding mattered. It matters because you can't fight a war against something that you either don't, can't, or refuse to understand. So today I want to explain the map that was drawn for me, not just the opioid crisis, not just addiction, the operating system, the systems inside the brain that can create love, ambition, attachment, obsession, compulsion, and eventually slavery. I've talked about this stuff before, but I think it all deserves a second appearance. And I'm doing a series of episodes on the main pieces of my recovery, and it's all intertwined, starting with neuroscience. And then we're going to tell you about medications and interventions that finally gave me a fighting chance after decades of chaos. And the connections, because, despite the mythology people love to sell about rugged individualism, nobody escapes addiction alone. Your brain is chemistry. Every thought, every feeling, every decision, the product of neurotransmitters passing between nerve cells across gaps called synapses. And understanding addiction requires us understanding just a few key systems. And you don't need to fully understand all of it. I don't. You don't have to be a rocket surgeon to pick up what I'm about to lay down. It's just the basics. The first is the reward pathway, specifically the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, running from an area deep in the brain to the nucleus accumbens, the limbic system, the reptilian brain of our ancestors, if you believe we evolved out of the ocean, or just call it the brain's pleasure center if you're a creationist. We're here. How and why isn't a part of this equation or episode. But someone needs to explain to me why their creator would give them a pleasure center and then torture them for eternity when it activates. I'm not being flippant. I really want to know what people think about that because I just can't make that compute. So leave a note in the comments about that or any addiction-related topic you want. But the pleasure center has an incredibly important role in species survival and propagation. When you do something that helps you survive, eat when hungry, connect with other humans, experience love or achievement, neurons fire, dopamine floods the nucleus accumbens, and the brain registers. That thing you just did, do that again. That matters. That keeps you alive, or that will let the species continue. Sitting above all of this, like a foreman's office above a very chaotic factory floor, is the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. The most recently evolved part of the human brain is what I'm told, and that might be why we haven't gotten the hang of it yet. It handles planning, judgment, impulse control, the ability to weigh long-term consequences against short-term desire. It's the part of the brain that says, yeah, I know that feels good right now, but here's what's going to happen tomorrow. Also critical is the amygdala, the threat detection and emotional memory center, and the locus coeruleus. It's a cluster of neurons in the brain stem that produces norepinephrine, regulating alertness and blood pressure and the fight, flight, or freeze response. And your brain produces its own opioids called endorphins. The runner's high, the warmth of human touch, the glow after genuine laughter. These bind to your opioid receptors and release dopamine in proportionate, sustainable amounts. The system works really well as designed, but here's what's happening when you take heroin or Oxycontin or fentanyl or Dilaudid or MS-Contin, and alcohol wreaks havoc too. So does cocaine, crystal meth, nicotine, gambling, sex, but they wreak in different ways. With opioids, the drugs bind to those same opioid receptors with a power your brain's own chemistry can't come close to. Dopamine floods the nucleus accumbens with 5 to 10 times the amount released by any natural reward, no matter how hard your toes curl. And it arrives at once, like almost instantly. The brain has no reference for this signal. It registers as this. That was the most important thing that's ever happened. Please, more. That's the hook. That is why the first experience is what it is. That's why the first hit is always free. The brain's deepest motivational machinery is screaming that this is the most critical thing it's ever encountered. And it will and does organize itself around ensuring that it happens again and again and again. The brain is adaptive. When it detects dopamine flooding at a level it wasn't designed for, it tries to restore balance. It downregulates dopamine receptors. In other words, it reduces the number of receptors available to receive the signal. It reduces its own natural dopamine production because the external supply seems more than adequate. The result is called tolerance. The same dose that produced euphoria last month produces approximate normal functioning. And the natural rewards like food, sunlight, music, sex now produce almost nothing. The receptors have been reduced, the natural production suppressed. You're not chasing a high anymore. You're chasing square one. You're medicating back to a baseline that other people experience as ordinary consciousness. Eventually, the baseline is below other people's normal. It's set firmly at barely functioning. The goal shifts from pleasure to functioning to barely not puking, and the shift happens so quickly you may not even know you should slow down until you've already crashed. After a week or two, I would wager anyone who uses strong opioids recreationally daily will be physically and mentally hooked. I know it's true because I lived it. By a certain point, and it wasn't very long, let me make that clear, I wasn't getting high, I was getting back to square one, and the work required to get there kept increasing, while the payoff kept diminishing, while the life I was trading for it kept shrinking. Not addicted people need to know and believe this about addiction. This is the part that explains everything about withdrawal. Your brain, not metaphorically, but in reality, believes it is dying without the drug, whether it's crack, smack, crank, or good old-fashioned booze. When opioids bind to receptors in the locus coeruleus, they suppress its activity. So norepinephrine production drops. So the alarm system quiets. This is why opioids make you drowsy and calm. The brain's threat detection is being chemically silenced. Because it's being chronically suppressed, it compensates by cranking its own baseline activity up, higher and higher, trying to maintain normal function against this ongoing supply that the addict keeps forcing onto it. Got it? The drug suppresses, the brain compensates upward, so more drug is needed to get the same drowsy, calm effects. The brain compensates more, and on until, surprise, you're a junkie. And you decide, I don't want my partner to leave me, or if this keeps up, I'm going to wind up in jail or fired. I got to stop. You take away the drug and say, how hard can it be? I'll just kick the sheets for a couple of days. I have willpower. The suppression lifts, but the brain is now running at a dramatically elevated baseline with nothing to press it back down, so it explodes. Not literally. But it releases massive amounts of norepinephrine through the brain and body. It has stopped making endorphins a long time ago because it didn't have to. There was plenty of opiates already, so it didn't have to bother. The locus coeruleus is central to the brain's survival signaling. When it fires at this intensity, it is producing the same neurological signal as mortal danger. Your brain, your actual physical brain, not your conscious rational mind, is generating the signal for you're about to die. Go get more dope at any cost. The result is withdrawal, anxiety, panic, heart rate surging, blood pressure spiking, sweating, shaking, insomnia, vomiting, diarrhea, bone pain, muscle pain, every sensory experience amplified to an unbearable degree. Everything smells terrible and everything tastes the way it smells. It sounds like the flu, but think about the worst flu you've ever had times 5 with the added misery, and this is the worst part in my opinion, of knowing how to make it all go away with one swallow, puff, snort, or shot. So the brain issues a survival emergency. This is a neurological alarm that is being wired to trigger in the absence of the drug. The body screams for relief. The only available relief is the drug. Those 4 sentences are an accurate written depiction of hell. When I was using and I felt that I needed heroin to survive, I was right. Not morally, not in the sense of what was good for me, but neurologically, my brain was issuing a survival signal indistinguishable from the one it would issue if I were actually dying. And I did things I would never even consider under normal circumstances. I don't want to go around hurting people I love or strangers. I don't want other people's things or their money. No prostitute I'm friends with made it a career choice because they like disgusting strange men hurting them. Nobody I was friends with on the streets woke up one morning and decided, you know what? I think I'll crush my families and give up my dreams, get the shit kicked out of me, turn in my dignity for spare change and moldy sandwiches, look forward to jail in the winter and loitering fines all summer. No one I know wanted to die, especially not by violence. And that signal in the brain is completely real. The lie is that the drug is the answer to it. Learning both of those things, the signal is real and the signal is lying, was the beginning of everything for me. While the reward system is being reorganized, something else is happening to the prefrontal cortex, the governor, mission control. Chronic opioid use significantly impairs PFC function. Brain imaging consistently shows reduced activity and reduced gray matter in this region in people with opioid use disorder. The region responsible for judgment, impulse control, long-term planning, and the ability to override immediate desire in favor of terrible consequences goes quiet. Think of it like giving the angel on your shoulder ketamine. The voice that says, yes, but what happens if you do this? Gets quieter and quieter, while the voice that says, need it now, nothing matters, gets louder. And this is why addiction produces behaviors that from the outside looks like someone who just doesn't care about the consequences. They do care. The caring is still there. It was for me at least, but let me qualify this again by firmly stating that some people are just awful. But the neurological stuff that translates caring into behavior for not awful people has been compromised by the substance that's killing them. This is also why willpower is not a recovery plan. Willpower lives in the prefrontal cortex. Asking someone in any active addiction to willpower their way to sobriety is like asking someone with a broken leg to run a marathon and then being disappointed in them when they can't do it. The tool you need to fix the problem is the tool the problem has broken. The amygdala, another part of the brain, stores emotional memories, particularly memories of relief, threat, and survival, of trauma. When you repeatedly experience relief from withdrawal by using, the amygdala encodes everything associated with that moment. Places, people, smells, sounds, emotional states. These become the most overused word in today's TikTok therapy classes. Triggers. But if you smell the cologne of the person who hurt you, it triggers a response almost exactly as if they were right there with you again. If you drive past the house where you used to buy your dope and flop, your brain sends you the same signals it did when you were in there looking for a clean spoon. And when you encounter a trigger, a neighborhood, a smell, a feeling that resembles what you used to use through, the amygdala fires. It produces a response, a craving, and it pushes you toward the thing it has learned to associate with survival. It's doing its job, and it does it well. It doesn't know that it's been duped. It learned that the drug meant survival. It will remind you of that lesson for years, even decades, even after you've rebuilt everything else. This is why relapse happens in the presence of a trigger, even when you genuinely want to be sober. The amygdala fires before the prefrontal cortex can respond, and the emotional brain is faster than the rational brain. The alarm goes off before the governor even wakes up. The solution isn't to try to want it less. The solution is to try to rebuild the prefrontal cortex, to make the governor wake up faster and make him stronger so it can react to the alarm before it produces behavior. And that is what the work of recovery does. Like meds. It seems counterintuitive to need drugs to stop using drugs, but for many reasons, they aren't optional. Not for my recovery. They are absolutely necessary. I fought this idea for so many years and now realize I could have crawled out of the gutter years earlier if I had just understood. I want to talk about Sublocade specifically, buprenorphine in general, but this specific formulation because my experience with it has been totally different for me than anything else I've tried in 25 years of trying things. Sublocade is a brand name as it's an extended release injectable form of buprenorphine, the same active ingredient in Suboxone. Buprenorphine is a partial opioid agonist, which means it binds to the same opioid receptors that heroin and fentanyl and Dilaudid and blah, blah, blah do, but it only partially activates them. It's a key that fits the lock, but only turns part way. It goes like this. So heroin fits right into the receptor. These things are too big, so they only fit in halfway. That's the way I picture it in my mind. And that way the brain can still produce some endorphins naturally. And what this does neurologically, it occupies the receptors. It provides enough activation to prevent the withdrawal alarm from firing. It reduces the cravings because the receptors aren't screaming that they're empty. And because of what's called a ceiling effect, where increasing the dose beyond a certain point produces no additional effect, it's dramatically harder to overdose on than full opioid agonists like methadone. Sublocade takes this one critical step further. It's an injection administered by a clinician once a month. It forms a solid depot, a small implant under the skin that slowly reduces buprenorphine at a controlled, consistent rate throughout the month. No peaks, no troughs, no daily dosing ritual, no pills you can skip, no pills you can sell. No moment in the day where the medication is a decision that you have to make. It's one injection, 1 month of stable, consistent, tamper-proof coverage. And what happened to me after my first injection was unlike anything I've ever experienced in all my years of trying to stop using. The cravings stopped. They didn't diminish, they stopped. Not the white knuckle absence of using where the craving is still there and you're just not acting on it. The craving Like the actual craving was gone. The background noise that had been running in my head every single day for 30 years, whatever, was quiet. I didn't even know what quiet was. I had no reference for it. I thought that the constant low level hum of wanting was just what consciousness felt like. I didn't know it was the addiction talking. What Sublocade had done was occupy those receptors thoroughly and consistently enough that my brain had nothing to alarm about. The survival signal stopped. The brain, receiving steady, stable buprenorphine, updated its assessment. Emergency over. Stand down. For the first time in 30 years, I woke up and thought, I don't need drugs. I woke up and the first thought I had was, whatever the next thing was. I was in rehab. Go class or play something. Rehab is easy. You know where you have to be. But ordinary life, I didn't know what to do with that at first. Ordinary life is disorienting when you've been living, in an emergency for 3 decades. I've been methadone for about 10 years. I've taken sublingual buprenorphine under the tongue, which is a Suboxone pill, same drug as Sublocade, for a year or so. I haven't tried naltrexone, but I have a history to draw from when I say what I'm about to say. Methadone works. The research is real. It reduces overdose deaths. It reduces criminal behavior a little bit. It improves social functioning if used properly. It's a great painkiller created by Nazi chemists for their troops when opiate lines were cut off during World War II. So, 85 years ago, it was top of the line synthetic opioid. I'm not arguing against it as a medication. I am arguing against it as a recovery tool for someone like me, and here is why. Methadone is a full opioid agonist. It fully activates the opioid receptors at therapeutic doses. You don't get high from it, but your brain is still receiving full opioid activation, which means the receptor system has not been given the chance to recalibrate. You are, in very real neurological sense, still on opioids. The brain doesn't know the difference between your methadone dose and a street fentanyl dose in terms of what it does to the reward pathway. More practically, you can use on top of methadone. I know this because I did it for 10 years. The methadone suppresses the worst of the withdrawal, but it does not block the effect of additional opioids the way buprenorphine does. A full agonist on top of another full agonist just means more agonism and agony. I used throughout my entire decade on methadone. The methadone was keeping me from getting too sick to go to work on days when I couldn't score. That was about it. It was not keeping me sober. In fact, it did nothing at all to stop my cravings for the drugs I liked too much. I wouldn't be physically ill, but the mental anguish of panicking because I didn't have drugs was still there and arguably worse, and I would be so distracted thinking about it, my life was effectively on hold until I scored. And with methadone, you have to go and get it every day, which can be prohibitive for someone with a job or kids or no car. Once you can take it home, you can sell it. You can skip Monday and double up on Tuesday so you get really high. It's easy to cheat. With Suboxone, the sublingual under the tongue pill, it's a better medication than methadone. For many people, me, I'm the only one to know about, it's a partial agonist, same as Sublocade because it's the same drug, just in pill form. It blocks other opioids more effectively. It's extremely difficult to overdose on other opiates while you're on it, and it has a ceiling, so you can't OD on it. I mean, if you take enough of any pill, you can do serious damage, but I've never heard of a Suboxone overdose. Let me know if I'm wrong. You can get Suboxone from any prescriber rather than having to attend a specialized clinic or see a specialized doctor like with methadone. But you take it every day, and every day is a decision. And the daily ritual of medication, the pill under the tongue, the timing, the management of doses keeps you in a pharmaceutical relationship with your addiction. That for me, maintained a daily connection to the ritual of the disease. You can skip doses. You can take less than prescribed and use the difference. You can sell doses. You can smoke it, believe it or not. The daily touch point is a daily opportunity for the addiction to negotiate. One great thing about Suboxone is it has naloxone in it. So if you inject it, you are essentially Narcaning yourself. So don't inject it. Sublocade is injected, but it removes the negotiation, which for me changed everything. I can't negotiate with my addiction. So taking away any choice for me to cheat is the only real option. One injection, a clinician administers it. It cannot be diverted, sold, skipped, or manipulated. The buprenorphine level in my blood is consistent every hour of every day for 30 days. No peaks where I feel I need more coverage, no troughs where the craving creeps back in, no daily decision to make, no ritual that echoes the ritual of using. Occasionally, a couple of days before my shot, I'm starting to feel like it's time for my shot. But I'm talking about minimal temperature shifts, like a sweaty sleep or two. Clinical data supports what my body already told me. Sublocade is associated with significantly lower rates of continued opioid use compared to Suboxone, meaning people on Sublocade are substantially less likely to test positive for illicit opioids. 28% of patients in the pivotal clinical trial that I read achieved treatment success compared to 2% on the placebo. Those are not small numbers. And this is my honest opinion, and I say it knowing it's going to land hard for some people. If you're an opioid addict and you're not willing to try Sublocade, I question whether you actually want to stop, because Sublocade removes all of the usual suspects that allow you to sabotage yourself. And if you won't remove those suspects, something in you is still protecting the option to use. And I say that with love. I say it because I was that person for a long time. The part of me that was not willing to remove my own escape route was the part of me that hadn't fully decided yet. Sublocade forced the decision in a way nothing else had. Before I move on from methadone, I need to say something about the person who prescribed mine for a short time. From 2007 to 2008, my methadone prescribing physician was Dr. Gabor Mate. And if you don't know who Gabor Mate is, you should, and I'll tell you. He's a Canadian physician who spent 12 years as the staff doctor for the Portland Hotel Society in Vancouver, British Columbia's downtown east side, which was and remains the most concentrated area of drug use in North America. He worked with the most severely addicted, most marginalized, most written off people in the country. And he helped develop supervised injection programs, needle exchanges, and housing first initiatives. He prescribed methadone to people like me without requiring that I be in treatment or prove I was looking for a job or sobriety. He didn't suspend my prescription if I tested positive for illicit drugs, because that's insane. And he recognized it before anyone else. He met people where they were. He treated me as I was. He also wrote a book called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts, which I recommend to every person who has ever loved someone with an addiction or who has one themselves. It argues with neuroscience and compassion in equal measure that addiction is not a moral failing or a genetic destiny, but a response to pain, that every addict is asking, with the only language available to them, for relief from the suffering that began long before the drug did. He's written other books too. That's the only one I've read. He was my doctor. I saw him monthly. He was treating some of the hardest cases in Canada in one of the most difficult neighborhoods in North America, with more compassion than most of the systems that had processed me combined. I was homeless at the time. I was in and out of jail. I was not on a visible trajectory toward anywhere but jail, institutions or death. And he showed up every month and prescribed my methadone without judgment, and he kept me alive. And I think about that a lot, about what it means that one of the most important voices on addiction in the world was, for a year, the person keeping me from dying on a street in Vancouver. The universe put me in front of the right person at the right moment, even when I wasn't ready to understand what that meant. The door was there. I just wasn't ready to walk through it. He moved on to spread the word as far and wide as possible, which for him has been incredibly far and wide. Here's the part I want you to hold on to. The brain's not fixed. It's plastic. It's malleable. It's changeable, capable of building new connections and reorganizing itself in response to a new experience. This property is called neuroplasticity, and it's the biological foundation of recovery. Everything that opioids did to your brain, the downregulation of receptors, the suppression of natural dopamine production, the impairment of the prefrontal cortex, the hyperactivation of the locus coeruleus, none of it's permanent. They're adaptations, and adaptations can be reversed. New ones can be built in their place. Brain imaging studies of people in sustained recovery show measurable physical changes. 6 months of sobriety produces visible increases in gray matter in regions associated with self-regulation. Dopamine receptor density recovers over time. The prefrontal cortex, suppressed during active addiction, rebuilds. The natural reward system, its ability to experience pleasure from ordinary life, comes back online, gradually, imperfectly, but measurably. The brain that addiction built can be rebuilt. This is not a metaphor. It is documented, measurable, repeatable neuroscience. What the research shows clearly is that the things that rebuild it are stable medication that removes the neurological emergency, behavioral therapy that carves new pathways, meditation and mindfulness that physically rebuild the prefrontal cortex, human connection that reactivates natural reward circuits, sleep that allows the cleaning and repair that waking life can't accomplish, and meaning, purpose, something to look forward to that gives the dopamine system something true to organize around. The 12 steps, the 4 directions, the spiritual work, the people who refuse to let go of me, all of it, neurologically doing exactly what the damaged brain needs. Please subscribe to my channel or follow my podcast or share it with someone who needs to hear it. It's the only way I can get this to people that it might help. And that's all I'm trying to do. If you have a recovery story of your own, or if I missed something, or maybe I got it wrong, I'd love for people to start a conversation in the comment section. This is the Loudness Make Evil Symposium. I am Jason, and I swear to you, it's all worth it. And I'll see you next time.